Hi, my name is Cambria, and I'm the host of the Advocation Nation podcast, a podcast dedicated to highlighting different advocacy voices and journeys in order to help folks understand ways that they can get more involved in their communities. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Dr. Mark Arapostathis, the mayor of La Mesa. He is known in his community as Dr. A. Dr. A has lived in La Mesa his entire life, and aside from being mayor, he is also the director of the children's theater Peter Pan Jr. Theater, as well as Sea Hook Theater, which is for high school age students. He's also the director of theater arts at La Mesa Arts Academy, and he was honored as one of San Diego County's Teachers of the Year. Before serving as mayor, he served for 8 years as city councilman and has also served on the La Mesa Community Services Commission, was the president of La Mesa Arts Alliance, as well as a founding member of the Sundays at 6 concert series hosted at Harry Griffith Park. These are just some of the many community initiatives and events that Dr. A is involved in. Thank you so much, Dr. A, for being here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So if you could just start off by telling us a bit about your background and how you ended up getting involved in local government and eventually became the mayor of La Mesa, that'd be so great.
My name is Mark Arapostathis, and I was born and raised in La Mesa and attended elementary school at the local elementary called Lemon Avenue. Then I went to La Mesa Junior High and graduated from Helix High School. I attended San Diego State University for my undergrad and my master's degree, and also San Diego State for my University of San Diego joint program for my doctorate. Along the way, I was involved in volunteering in activities for the city. I also volunteered for a local youth theater called Peter Pan Jr. Theater. I was a member of the theater when I was in elementary school, and then in high school volunteered as an assistant director. And and volunteered in other ways through the community. There were opportunities through the Kiwanis and other service organizations. There'd be a call for volunteers at our high school, and I would volunteer, and volunteered at my elementary school, which my mother was a teacher at. And so service was something that was important to me, and it was talked about in our household and also at my church, but also for the adults that interacted with me, talked about that service would make your community stronger if you served in your community. So I did that along the way. When I became an elementary school teacher at Murdoch Elementary School, I was still serving, and I had become the director of the youth theater program, Peter Pan Jr. Theater. The then director, Mr. Bob Kuhn, had been doing it for about 2 decades and was trying to spend more time with his wife and his kids. And so he turned it over to me. And through that opportunity, I got to meet more people. And eventually I was asked to volunteer for the Community Services Commission, which is one of the 12 commissions that the city of La Mesa, the city I lived in, had offered out to the public. They have 12 commissions, and they asked the public to volunteer their time. And from that, there was an opening on the city council in 2006, and I was encouraged to run. Now, at that time, I'd never been involved in politics, not even at my school. I wasn't part of the ASB or the local school government. So I was very much a novice, but had people helping me. And initially there were 4 or 5 people running, but I got out kind of early and was walking neighborhoods and getting to know people. And people that I had already known were positive about this experience. And so in the end, everyone else dropped out. So I was lucky enough to run unopposed. And then I ran again. And after being on the city council and serving with that council, I started having a better understanding of what the role of local government was. And it was to serve the people in the community. And it's an overused cliche, but to think globally and act locally. And so that's kind of what I saw. The city council at the time was a bit dysfunctional. There was a mayor that had been there for over 30 years. To be quite candid, it was a bit hostile. So I ran for mayor, and the mayor's service in a city council like ours is 1 of 5. We're still part of the council. You're 1 vote of 5, but you run the meetings. So the mayor, she or he, whoever that person is, runs the meeting, sets the agenda, and kind of sets the general tone. And so that was one of the reasons I ran for mayor. And the same year that I ran for mayor, the city also passed a term limit initiative by the community members. So you can serve for mayor in our city for 3 terms, and I'm in my 2nd term. My term is up 2022, and I'm going to run again. And then if I am lucky enough to be elected, I will serve 3 terms until 2026. And so that's the general story of how I got to be the mayor, just a kind of a lifetime of service. And then there were some openings, and I decided to attempt to serve on the city council.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And it's really great to hear how you started getting involved in your community from a young age. And so just shifting gears for a quick second, what is some advice you'd give to younger folks, or honestly, just anyone looking to get more involved in their community or ongoing efforts or volunteering? What are some pieces of advice you would give for that?
Most cities, and if you're talking about young people in high school or in college, or even people that are graduates, most cities and or communities have some type of mechanism for volunteerism. You have to go look for it, and it could be a service organization. And I'll say that most young people, when I try to direct them toward Kiwanis or Lions or Rotary, I met with some pushback that that's for old people. That's not the truth. The elderly that are retired have more time to serve or to meet during the middle of the day, but they encourage younger people and wish younger people would come because they're operating at a level, obviously, for the generation that they're in, people that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s. And so when they're trying to give back to the community, they're operating at that level, and they welcome young voices to help them see where some resources could be pushed to. Also, most cities, I would say, have some type of outreach for volunteers. We, at our city of Mesa, I think, does a fine job because, like I said, we mostly use volunteers because it offsets the cost. But if you're a young person, there's a commission on parking. There's a commission on mobility. It used to be called the traffic commission, but now it's mobility because we wanted to include all modes of transportation, even pedestrians. We have a police oversight board that was just started. And so that's to help the police improve some of the ways they interact with the public, and also for the public to have some voice if there's conflict. We also have the Community Service Commission. So if someone wanted to volunteer in our city, there's more spots than we have volunteers sometimes. And it's a great way to get involved and also to find out how the government works. One last thing I would say is we've also had people come to us and ask, could we start a task force? The last one we did was the homeless. I had asked to work with a community member to start a task force. We had 25 people come out. We sat 14 people on a task force to find out how we could best serve the homeless and how we could best get people housed. And so they met for 2 years and they came up with recommendations. And from that, we started our home program. The home program is a homeless outreach and mobile engagement. It's a program that's funded by state and federal funding. In any case, it's a way to not just serve people that are homeless, but our ultimate goal is to get permanent housing for people and training so they can be self-sufficient. And so where I'm going with this is if I'm a young person and I'm in college or out of college, and I find something that I'm passionate about, I would approach my local city council and say, is there a chance we could get a task force? I have 7 people that are interested in something, and there's a good chance that they would allow you to meet and bring a recommendation back to the city.
That is such great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And definitely one of the goals of this podcast is for listeners to realize that there are many different ways they can get involved in their community, get engaged with ongoing efforts. And so those are just some really great pieces of advice, whether you're in La Mesa or whether you're anywhere else in the United States or the world.
Yes, true.
Yeah. And so shifting gears a little bit, this is a very big question, but what does a day in the life of a mayor look like? And what are some other community efforts that you're involved in?
To be clear to your listeners, that I'm in the county of San Diego, and we have 18 cities in the county of San Diego, and each one has some uniqueness to it. If you're on a coastal city, it has, obviously, you're dealing with problems or issues that deal with the coast. If you're in the South, you could be a border city. You have some daily occurrences there. Out of the 18 cities, there are only 2 cities that have a full-time mayor. That would be the mayor, Chula Vista, and their city council is full-time, and the mayor of San Diego and their city council are both full-time. And the mayor of San Diego is our only mayor that is called a strong mayor. And a strong mayor can actually make decisions without the city council. They can make decrees, executive decisions, and they can hire and fire members of the staff. Now, in the city of La Mesa is indicative of most of the cities. For instance, the mayor is one of the council members, and the mayor, he or she would be the executor of the city, but I only have 2 employees. I hire the city manager and the city attorney. All other employees are hired by the city manager. I'm framing this because when I tell you the next part of this, it will help, I think, your listeners understand. I'm a full-time school teacher, and the reason I am is because I'm not paid a full salary to be the mayor. I'm paid minimum wage. I get $14.10 an hour to be the mayor. And so due to that, I have to work a job that helps me sustain my life and pay my mortgage and whatnot. So the day in the life is I usually get up about 4:30 in the morning and get ready, and I go to City Hall around 5:15, and I work until 6:30, and then I go to school. So I do as much work as I can at City Hall, and that would entail reading over contracts, signatures, answering emails from the public. Department heads will send me requests about things, and I read all of that. I try to get as much of that work done as I can, so it's not prohibitive for the staff to work, because if they have questions, they need answers, they need that for their workday. So I do as much of that as I can. Then I go to school and I teach. And at 11 o'clock, I have a break in the middle of the day because I'm the director of the arts. And so I have a break, and I have an understanding that that's my time. And so I drive back to City Hall from 11 to 12:30. And that's when I have meetings with people and whatever else I need. And then after the day is over at 2:45, I drive back to City Hall from 2:45 to 4:15. And then I drive back to school because I have rehearsal, because I run Peter Pan Junior Theater. And so that's my typical day. And City Hall, conveniently enough, is only a mile away from my school. So what I don't really participate in most mayors, is I don't go to breakfast meetings and lunch meetings and a lot of ceremonial things. I ask the people of the Chamber of Commerce, or there's a ribbon cutting, I ask them to do that after school hours or on a weekend and things like that. I don't go to a lot of the ceremonial things that the mayors will go to because I just don't have time for that. Most of the other mayors in the cities are retired. And so that doesn't sound very exciting. It's kind of boring, I suppose, but that's my entire day.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Definitely a busy and full schedule, but it's good to hear some insight into how that kind of local government aspect works, especially for the city of La Mesa or
Right.
other cities that are in a larger county. That's really great insight. And so my next question for you is geared more towards advocacy. And it is, how does advocacy play a role in your work, whether it be advocating for the needs of the community of La Mesa or seeing advocacy efforts of your constituents?
As far as I'm concerned, when you look at the role of local government, especially, that it should be all about advocacy, and government should be a place for everyone, and we're known as left behind. And I would think that you're always advocating for everyone. And so not waiting for someone to call for help, but try to go to those areas where you think that people may need resources. And so because I'm a teacher, I have some greater insight maybe than some of my other council members. And so I talk to the other schools, I talk to counselors. And so my advocacy comes in the form of trying to help families that may need help. Obviously, during COVID, it's been unusual and there's been more need than we have resource sometimes, but advocacy is an outreach. And so what I try to do is keep on top of that. And how I do that is I'm involved in obviously my school and my school district. I'm part of the Salvation Army Croc Council. I'm part of a group that we started called the Hope Alliance that serves the families of La Mesa and Spring Valley area. I'm on the MTS board, obviously Peter Pan and Seahook. That's where I get most of my information. And the other thing I do is I work with our commissions. So I ask our 12 commissions, even though one might be about parking, I ask about what we can do. We also have a adult enrichment center, some would call it a senior center, and I ask what we can do. And we get lots of information about people that have mobility issues that aren't able to go places. And this is just one specific example, but a lot of seniors that they're mobile, but they don't have transportation, they have transportation issues. The longer they stay in the house, the longer they're not active, obviously it has a negative effect on their mental and their physical health. So we try to get around visiting as much as we can. We have a rides sharing program that was started because of this. And we try to advocate on behalf of the seniors to make sure that they're getting out at least once a week and they're interacting with other people. Same thing with groups in poverty. I find out from our counselors, and we have a group that deals with families that are in poverty, and there's a special set of needs, and trying to attach them to resources that they might not know are available, especially for there's parents that are single, that are working, that are trying to maintain a household on a certain budget, and there's resources for them at the state level, and they're not aware of that. So advocacy comes in connecting people with resources that already exist. And also, if those resources don't exist, trying to find out how the city can provide resources. And maybe the resources aren't just monetary. It could be in the form of, like I've said, human contact. That's what we try to do. But I'm lucky in the fact that because I have 2 jobs, I have my ear out and I'm able to hear where there's need. We have a very open door policy in our city. If you call the city manager, this is unusual everywhere, you'll probably get a call back. I've visited people at their homes. We're a town of 60,000, but it cuts down on the disconnect and the people not trusting government when you see people face to face. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, sometimes the encounters aren't pleasant, but it does build a layer of trust.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's really great insight into what it looks like to be an advocate or be part of a larger community. I think one of the things, or one of the main themes throughout the episodes of this series, has been that a big part of advocacy is truly just listening to other people, listening to other stories and perspectives, and then also joining with other people who are fighting for similar causes or interested in the same things. And I know you mentioned that when you were talking about more ways for people to get involved in their communities. And so this last question is basically, how can listeners, particularly people in the San Diego area, support community efforts in the city of La Mesa, Peter Pan Junior Theater, or any other organizations you think are worth checking out?
That is a good question. Well, for Peter Pan and for Seahawk Theater, I'll start with that and just do a personal promo. Is we're trying to raise money to build a rehearsal space, because right now we rehearse at the school and we have an agreement, but I'm an employee of the district. That's why we can rehearse at the school. Someday in the future, I'll be retiring and then we won't have that ability. And I don't want this theater to go away because it's important to me. It is an advocacy group. It is a group of outreach, and it is more than just a youth theater. So we're trying to build a building right now, and the district has allowed us to have some land, and we have an agreement. So we're trying to raise money. And through a series of events, an anonymous person came to a show, was so overwhelmed by the children's performance off stage, not on stage, how they dealt with the public, how kind they were to one another. They anonymously donated $500,000 to us. So we have a big jump on things, but that's how I'm asking people to get involved with the theater. So I'm finished with that little ad. As far as the cities, I would say if people are interested, what they should do is connect themselves to a program that cities already have, because there's always a need. Our homeless program, the home program, we have 2 counselors, and we have a mobile van, and they go out. We've placed, and this is not going to sound like a big number to the public, but since January, we've placed 60 homeless people in permanent housing on their own, paying rent. And I say that, and there are residents that say, well, big deal. And I said, 60 is a huge number because it's a long process. You don't just walk up to someone that is homeless that may have addiction problems or that they're separation from their family, lots of other issues, and say, hey, we have a place for you to live in, and they instantly take that aid. And so there's a lot of building of trust and listening. And so there's those programs. And so I always ask people when they come to me, how can I help the city? I said, our community service department, when you ask them, are there volunteer opportunities? They always have it. We're able to offset the cost of running our city. This isn't the main reason, but we're able to offset the cost for the hours and hours of volunteerism. It offsets the cost of, I think we've saved over the last 12 years, $20 million just on not having to have salaried people there. And so there's always need. What people need to do is you have to look for it. That's kind of the problem. The other problem is to be willing. If you go to an organization, if I went to an organization or a church or to a service organization and they were working on something and I said, I want to do X. And they said, we really don't need that, but would you mind doing Y and Z? And I say, no, I'm only going to, I think be willing to serve in any capacity that you want. I'll give you an example with the theater. I have lots of people that come and say, hey, I want to work with the kids on dance. I said, well, I don't really need anybody to work on dance. I have 10 assistant directors. There's a choreographer, but would you be willing to help with tickets? And they say no. And so I guess what it comes down to is when I was volunteering, there were lots of things that I had aspirations because I wanted to volunteer in this way. I think any way that someone asks you to help, that's the way to start. And then as you do it for a while, there's opportunities that change and you say, you know what, I see a need here, and you mobilize some other people, and nothing's too little. That's the last thing I'll say. I'm working with a group right now that's come to me and I said, I know this isn't a very, a big thing that's going to get big headlines, but we have lots and lots of trash along the freeway exits, and they're operated by Caltrans, California Department of Transportation. They don't really spend a lot of time cleaning up the trash, and the wind blows and it gets caught against the fences. And it's just, we know through lots of data that when people don't like where they live because they think it's run down, it has a mental effect on everyone. And then they start not taking care of their own space, and it's a domino effect. And so I have a group right now of 7 people, and I've gone with them. We go in the mornings very early, and we have little trash pickers uppers, and we spend about 2 hours and we just pick up trash, and sometimes we cut some weeds. We're really not supposed to do this because it's Caltrans, but we beautify a little area. They feel good about themselves. I feel good, and the public is happy. And I know, someone say, well, you're not changing the world. You're right. But we're changing that little portion of it, and every little bit helps. And any time that you give your time, it's never nothing. We're not always going to be changing everything. And like I said before, we think globally and act locally. And I think that's what it is. But people have aspirations. They want to have a big ticket item that's going to look good on the news. It's not always that way. So I encourage everyone to volunteer in their neighborhoods, even mobilize people within your neighborhood, get a neighborhood watch together and keep your neighborhood beautiful. I know that's a small start, but that's the way a lot of people do start.
That is great. And thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And just going back to what you said about having an open mindset when it comes to volunteering or serving in your community, I think that's a lesson that anyone, regardless of how old you are, can take away. It's definitely trying lots of different things. I know I personally have been trying a lot of different things, and, sometimes it's a lot of hours, but it's something that I've been able to step back and say, wow, I've made a lot of really great connections. And so I just encourage anyone, I just echo what you're saying, that there are really great ways to get involved, and there are definitely great ways to explore different pathways just by kind of opening up your mindset. Thank you so much, Dr. A, for being here, for taking the time out of your day to just talk with us a bit about what it's like being the mayor of La Mesa, what it's like being involved in the community. We truly appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Babbitt-Judd. I am so happy that you're doing this. I think this is a great outreach that you're doing on your own. This is volunteerism and getting information out and educating people. And that's the last thing I would say is local government needs to do a better job of educating the public on what their purview is, what their authority is, what they can and can't do, and try to make connections that way and not be left on its own on the merits of Facebook. Sorry, but I'm not a big fan, or Nextdoor, or any of the other things that are basically used to tear down and not build up. And so I appreciate that you're doing this. Continue the good work that you're doing. I look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you. I really appreciate that.